So this week is going to be a little bit of throwback of last year, where remember how last year the MLS schedule is so condensed that literally there's like full slate of action every 3 days, and that every team basically play in the middle of the week, and then just a couple of days later they of course play another match week as part of the weekend's action. Well, that's exactly what's going to happen this week, as every team for the first time is going to be playing in the middle of the week, followed by the weekend's action. Well, technically not every team, because this year, since there's an odd number of teams, there's always going to be one team that is not going to be playing if there's a full slate of action that is happening in a match week. And for this midweek action in match week number 9, the winner of the bye week sweepstake is Inter Miami. Although I wouldn't say that they're kind of the winner of the bye week sweepstake, because they do have another game that is going to be coming up in the weekend, and they're actually going to be the first team that is going to be playing in the weekend's action in a couple of days, as they play against Orlando City, which, speaking of which, that is the first team we're going to talk about. And also, like what I did before last year, whenever you have like that many games that happen in just 2 days, I tend to split the preview into 2 parts, and in part 1 I'll look at the first 6 games that is going to be happening in the midweek action. But like I said, the first game we're going to talk about, and as I mentioned about Orlando City, that's the team that we're going to talk about first, as they're going to be playing against the San Jose Earthquakes, and this is also the only game that's going to be happening on Tuesday and happen tomorrow, while the 12 other game that is going to be happening on Wednesday. And boy, oh boy, I have no idea how am I going to try to keep up with most of those games, and that it's going to be kind of like last year all over again, where especially during the 7:30 and 8 p.m. time, there tends to be like 8 games that is going to be at the same time. And well, it's going to be tough for me to try to keep up all these games in terms of the midweek action. But at least on Tuesday, there's only one game, which again, it's Orlando City versus the San Jose Earthquakes. I also forgot to put the time of this game, which will start at 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff time is not until 7:38 p.m. local time. And this game, unfortunately, is going to be on 2D and on Twitter, and it is actually the only game that's going to be nationally televised in terms of the midweek action. But Orlando, they of course came off of a 3-2 win against TFC away, and you notice how I put away as a quotation mark, because they weren't really playing a road game. Like, they were playing at Exploria Stadium. They were literally playing against their renter in that game. Well, for the Quakes, they are winless in 5 games, and I mentioned before how the Quakes are in a really rough patch, but at least in the last game, they did kind of stop the bleeding, where they were in a free-for-all of losing 4 in a row, and did get a 0-0 draw against Austin FC, and now their record is 3-1-5. In terms of the last 5 head-to-head between both of these teams, and literally this is the last 5 head-to-head meeting is the only 5 meeting that they had, is this is actually the 6th meeting between both of these teams. But the last meeting was actually all the way back in 2019, when the Quakes did win 3-0 against Orlando City, before Orlando City did win 3-2 against the Quakes back in 2018. Then it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams, and then a 2-2 draw between both of these teams, followed by a 1-1 draw between both of these teams in the first meeting back in 2015. And as much as I know this is a game that I really hope the Quakes can get all 3 points, so they can really stop this free fall and get themselves back on track, it's not going to be easy, especially the fact that they had a short week. And anytime when you have a short week and you have to fly all the way across the other side of the country, it is going to be very difficult. Although for the Quakes, I don't think they're going to have that big of an issue, because I'm assuming with this team playing in Austin back in Saturday, they probably did not fly back to San Jose. They probably stay in Austin for a bit and then fly to Orlando City. I mean, if that's not the case, then that's kind of a logistic nightmare, and it also kind of doesn't make sense why they want to fly back to San Jose and then just a couple of days later fly to Orlando City. I mean, I guess maybe the only reason why they decided to do that is that at least they have like a day at their home base, and they can maybe do a training day on that. But even then, that's still a very tight window, especially with the way that this game is happening on Tuesday. So I'm assuming these players might have stayed in Austin, and it is still a relatively long flight from Austin to Orlando, but it's not as bad as, let's say, them flying from San Jose to Orlando on a short short rest. And again, teams that usually, when they have to make that cross country flight on a short rest, are teams that usually have a huge disadvantage. And not to mention that the Quakes do not do well on the road, and Orlando City has been a team that has made Explorer Stadium a relatively good fortress. And I don't remember the last time that anybody actually beat Orlando City at home, and that is not in the playoffs. I mean, in the playoffs, New England was the last team to do it, but not in the playoffs, but in the regular season. I kind of don't remember who exactly is the last team to able to. Oh, actually, I know who it is. It was actually Nashville SC last season. They actually won 3-2 on decision day against Orlando City. But my point is, Explorer Stadium is an absolute fortress, and it's going to be tough for the Quakes to get all 3 points in this game against an Orlando City side that is trying to chase down New England for that top spot in the Eastern Conference. But now moving on in terms of the next match. And speaking of New England, that's what the next game is going to be feature them, as this is the first of what would be 12 games that's going to be happening on Wednesday. And this game will start at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, but the kickoff of this game will be 7:08 p.m. local time, as they're going to be playing against the Red Bulls. And this is also the second time that both of these teams face off against each other. The first meeting was a couple of weeks ago when New England was able to win 2-1 against the Red Bulls, or actually, was it 2-1 or 3-1 that they of course won against the Red Bulls? Either way, they did beat the Red Bulls in that game at Gillette Stadium. The Revs, of course, they are red hot coming into this game. They have won 4 in a row, and they also have been unbeaten in their last 6 games. While the Red Bulls, they have been struggling on the road this season. I mean, the Red Bulls this season, it's been kind of I wouldn't say it's been a bad year, but at the same time, it's not really a good year. And I would say that this is kind of a mediocre year, and their record pretty much shows it, where they have actually the exact same amount of wins that they have in losses, and all their wins this season has came at home at Red Bull Arena, but all their losses this season, well, 3 of the 4 losses that they have lost this season has come on the road. And in terms of the head-to-head meeting, well, New England, this actually pretty much confirmed that the last meeting was actually a 3-1 win that they had, not 2-1 as I mentioned earlier. But before that, it was the Red Bulls winning 1-0 against New England. It was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams, and then it was another 1-1 draw between both of these teams, this time in Red Bull Arena, and the Refs did win 1-0 against the Red Bulls. So the Refs does have a good record against the Red Bulls when they are playing at Gillette Stadium, but it's also because of the fact that when you just look at this meeting, and also the fact that I know this is definitely going to be a hotly contested meeting, because both of these teams do not like each other, and there tends to be that rivalry between both of these teams when they face off against each other. But obviously I think New England is going to be the favorites, because right now they are really rolling in terms of these last couple of games, and are actually started to run away a little bit in terms of the Eastern Conference race. I mean, they actually build up a 5-point gap over Orlando City in terms of the top spot in the Eastern Conference. And if they can, of course, get another win here, and let's say if Orlando City does drop points against the Quakes at home, then New England can really take a really good early lead in terms of the top standing in the Eastern Conference, and they might even have some aspiration of maybe even catching the Seattle Sounders in terms of the Supporter Shield race. I mean, Seattle is leading currently in the Supporter Shield race early, but New England is actually only 1 point behind the Sounders in terms of that. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is going to be NYCFC versus Atlanta. So both of these teams definitely come off of wild resort in the last game, but definitely wild resort that were not in their favorite, because for NYCFC, their last game, they lost 3-2 against New England, and actually they have lost their first 2 games at Red Bull Arena. I mean, Red Bull Arena has not been kind to them, and it's kind of not a big surprise, because it seems like the MLS gods didn't like the fact that NYCFC is playing in their rival stadium, so they decided to put a curse on them and making sure that they suffer some heartbreaking losses in their first 2 games. And that was the case in that game against New England, where they gave up 2 late goals and had a couple of chances to tie the game up, but they weren't able to solve the riddles of Matt Turner in goal, and in the end up losing that one 3-2. Whereas for Atlanta United, they were 2-0 up against the Union, but they end up giving up 2 late goals of their own to draw 2-2, and it was actually the second consecutive home game where they went up 2-0 late in the game, only to concede 2 goals in the last 10 minutes to drop points at home. Now, this game will start at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is not until 7:38 p.m. local time. By the way, the record for both of these teams, NYCFC have a 3-2-3 record, while for Atlanta, they have a 2-5-1 record currently. Although, well, yeah, a 2-5-1 record right now, and they're kind of also have the same record as Nashville SC right now. And you know how I always talk about Nashville SC as being the draw kings of MLS because they tend to have tons of draw. Well, it seems like this is starting to be the case for Atlanta too, because again, Atlanta and Nashville both have the same record, and both of them are actually leading the league in terms of 5 draws that they have this season. Now, in terms of the head-to-head meeting, which includes the playoffs, NYCFC did win the last meeting. They won 4-1 against Atlanta, before Atlanta did win 2-1 against NYCFC. And then in the playoffs back in 2019, Atlanta was able to win 3-1 against NYCFC before they win 1-0 at Yankee Stadium against NYCFC in the first leg. Or actually, no, that was in 2019. This was actually 2018 that both of these teams, of course, met. And then the prior meeting, it was a 1-1 draw between both of this team. And I remember a couple of years ago when both of these teams were facing against each other, and when both of these teams were actually the top 2 team in the Eastern Conference. This always tends to be a fixture that a lot of people are looking forward to it, because you have 2 heavyweight basically facing off against each other. And while both of these teams aren't really as big of a heavyweight as they were a couple of years ago, it is still a very exciting match. And again, both of these teams have been able to score tons of goals, at least in this last game, and maybe once again we could be in for a good game, and maybe there's gonna be some goals that's gonna be scored in this one. But now moving on, in terms of the next match, is probably the one that I think everybody is going to be keeping an eye on, and this is, if you're going to talk about which match is going to be the match of the week in terms of the midweek action, and that, of course, is this one between the Union versus Columbus, aka kind of the rematch of the Super Cup earlier this season, where the defending Supporter Shield team is facing against the defending MLS Cup team. Now, in this first meeting between both of these teams, it definitely did not live up to its expectation to be a very exciting match, because it was a 0-0 draw between both of these teams, and it was kind of a relatively slow pace kind of game. But I guess maybe the reason why that was the case was both of these teams were still in CCL, and right now, Philly are still in CCL right now, but since that competition doesn't resume, I believe, until August, I expect maybe we're going to see much more attacking action, and much more things that's going to happen compared to the last match. Now, in terms of this one, this game will kick off start at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff time will not start until 7:38 p.m. local time. The Union, of course, drew 2-2 against Atlanta, as I mentioned, while Columbus, in their final game at the historic Crew Stadium, they won 2-0 against the Chicago Fire at home. And I also kind of forgot to mention in the review that it's only fitting the fact that Columbus would actually not only win their final home game, but the scoreline, of course, would be 2-0, because, that stadium will always be a stadium that is home of Dos a Cero, and it's just fitting the fact that they would actually have a send-off of that stadium with the same scoreline as the historic Dos a Cero match between USA versus Mexico all the way back in 2001. Now, in terms of the last 5 head-to-head matchup, as I mentioned, the first matchup was definitely a bit anticlimactic with a 0-0 draw between both of these games. Columbus did win 2-1 against the Union after that, before winning 1-0 against the Union. They also did win 2-0 against the Union before the Union winning 3-0 against Columbus. So basically, I know you probably think, how in the world did the last 4 matchup actually was taking place at the historic Crew Stadium? Well, you got to remember, some of those meetings happened in the MLS's back tournament, and I think it was either this one or this one that happened in the MLS's back tournament. But either way, Columbus does have a good record against Philly whenever the game is played at Historic Crew Stadium, but this game is not played at Historic Crew Stadium, but actually at Subaru Park. And this season the Union, they haven't really been at its best at home, although they have started to do much better after they lost their first two game at home. And for Columbus, they also have been a team that has struggled in terms of playing on the road, though they did kind of snap finally their long road losing streak in that last road game against NYCFC. But either way, this should be a very good matchup, and it's kind of shame the fact that this matchup happened in the middle of the week. Like, midweek games are usually the one where it's not going to be covered by national television, and it's not going to be covered by ESPN or FS1. But still, I think a lot of people is going to looking forward to this matchup, even if it's not going to be on national television. But now moving on, in terms of the next match, is the Wooden Spoon Derby between the Chicago Fire and FC Cincinnati. So the reason why I say this is the Wooden Spoon Derby is because both of these teams are currently at the top of the standing in the Wooden Spoon race, which I don't think that is a standing you would like to top at, but I guess for Cincinnati fans, with how bad things have gone, it's getting to a point where with how bad their team has been, it's kind of driven them to insanity to believe that winning the Wooden Spoon is almost as good as winning MLS Cup. But in terms of this game also, actually, this might be the same case for Chicago Fire fans too, because didn't they won back-to-back Wooden Spoon back in 2017, or no, not 2017, but 2016 and 2017. They won back-to-back Wooden Spoon, or actually I think it was 2015 and 16, because 17 was the Galaxy winning the Wooden Spoon. 2018, of course, was the Quakes winning the Wooden Spoon. So both of these teams know what it feels like of winning the Wooden Spoon, and it seems like they're once again in that race again, where it seems like the loser of this game is going to win the Wooden Spoon. Well, actually, I wouldn't say that, because we still have a long way to the beginning, or not the beginning of the season, but to the end of the season. Now, also, whenever you see a game between two bottom feeder, if the MLS Super Draft was actually still something that is important, like other leagues are, some people would also say this is kind of like a tank bowl, where both teams are just kind of tanking for that number one draft pick. But, again, MLS, in terms of the Super Draft, I know occasionally we do see some hidden gems that come out of the Super Draft, but there usually isn't a lot of times where the number one draft pick usually ends up to be an absolute studs in the league. And I don't think both of these teams are thinking about tanking of getting that number one draft pick. So in the end, that's why I call this the Wooden Spoon Derby, because both of these teams are fighting for that Wooden Spoon, and the loser, of course, are the one that is going to come closer to getting that Wooden Spoon. But this Wooden Spoon Derby will take place at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Local time kickoff will be 7:08 p.m. local time. Chicago, of course, they lost 2-0 against Columbus away to drop their record to 1-6, while Cincinnati, they lost 2-0 to Colorado at home, and their record is now at 1-5. In terms of the last four head-to-head meetings, as this is going to be the fifth meeting between both of these teams, it was a 0-0 draw between both of these teams before Chicago did win 3-0 against Cincinnati. Then it was a 0-0 draw between both of these teams, and then Cincinnati actually got a rare win in that 2019 season, and one of those rare wins was against the Chicago Fire on the road. And I believe that's the first game that... No, actually, that wasn't the first game that they, of course, won on the road. But it was one of the first game that they, of course, were able to get all 3 points on the road. And we'll see whether or not if they can do it again, because I really think when you look at Cincinnati in these last two games, I really think they haven't played badly in these last two games. In fact, these last 3 games, including the one that they won against Montreal, they actually have played relatively well and haven't looked like a team that is sitting at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. Now, obviously, they were very unlucky in that last game against Colorado, where despite the fact that they outshot Colorado like 22-8 and outshot them in terms of shots on goal like 7-2, they unfortunately weren't able to be clinical, and they also were met by an opposition goalkeeper that was just saving everything and literally not letting them score in the goal. Whereas you got a Chicago Fire team that they definitely look like a team that is a bomb feeder with the way that they have looked flat week after week and have not looked like a team that really has that implication to really go anywhere. Maybe this is kind of a thing that maybe FC Cincinnati would be kind of the favorites in this game. But like I said, whenever in a wooden spoon derby, I really don't know who exactly is the favorites. And in some way, I know a lot of people won't keep an eye on this game, but I will also say that sometimes a wooden spoon derby does provide some of the best score line and some of the best action you will ever see in an MLS game. But we shall see if that is going to be the case, and I hope I didn't just jinx that by saying that this is going to be a great game, and it turns out it's just going to be a 0-0 bore fest between both of these teams. But now, moving on into the last game that I'm going to talk about in part one of this preview is Minnesota. They are going to be playing against Austin FC, so the Loons are back at Allianz Field after a couple of games on the road, and they actually have been doing much better after that disastrous 0-4 start, as they have actually now gone unbeaten in 4 games and improved their record to 2-4. Now, they still are near the bottom of the Western Conference right now, but they are steadily climbing up the Western Conference right now, are now up to 12th place, and depending on if they can win this game against Austin FC, they could definitely get themselves even higher in terms of the standing. Now, for Austin FC, it's definitely been a struggle in terms of these last couple of games, and you know how I talk about expansion team, they always tend to struggle come out of the gate because, with a relatively new team and just a team with kind of no structure whatsoever, and takes time to kind of for the team to gel before things are going to work out. Well, that's kind of what Austin FC is suffering right now, but it's not really the fact that this team has no structure, because in most of the games I've seen, I know what they're going to do, and I like the ideas of what Josh Wolf is implementing this team, but the big issue why they haven't been able to win a lot of games lately is because they couldn't score goals. And I know it sounds like a cliche every time I say, well, if you can't score goals, then you're not going to win a lot of games. But that couldn't be more true for Austin FC, where you look at these last couple of games. I think they only have scored like 2 goals in the last 5 games, and that goal well has really dried up in terms of this team. Now, in terms of the head-to-head meeting, and for Austin, even though they only won 2 games so far this season, one of those 2 wins was against Minnesota, and it was that 1-0 win that they, of course, got against the Loons earlier this year at Allianz Field, and that was also, at that point, was probably the lowest point that the Loons had that season. Well, it was actually followed by the very next week when they blew a 2-0 lead against Colorado and lose 3-2 to really hit rock bottom for their start of the season and go 0-4. So, maybe Austin will believe that they can, of course, do it again and maybe get all 3 points against Minnesota, but the Loons want some revenge out of that game. And where Austin has kind of really struggled in the past couple of games in terms of figure out their finishing, Minnesota has done a little bit better in terms of that. Now, albeit it doesn't really show on the score line, because when you look at the past couple of games, they actually still have not scored more than 1 goal so far in the last couple of games. In fact, I think throughout out there this season, they only scored two goals only 1 time, and it was in that game against the Rapids, which they end up losing 3-2. But this team, when you just look at the way that they have trouble in terms of scoring, I feel like at least in this last couple of games, they're showing some improvement, and that not only the fact that they're being a little bit optimistic going forward, but also they're actually testing the goalkeepers and actually forcing them to make some good save to not concede, and that was something I did not see with Minnesota a couple of weeks ago. So I'm just hoping that will continue, and I'm also hoping some of these new guys like Hunu, Frekapani, and even Reynoso back to 100% will actually start to get this attack going, because as much as I know things have gone much better for this team after that disastrous 0-4 start, they're still one of the worst team in the league if you actually look in the standings, and this is the thing that will probably never erase in the mind of me when I support this team, is that when you go start an 0-4, it really doesn't matter if you go on a bit of an unbeaten run, as until you actually started to go in a bit of a long unbeaten run and really dug yourself out of this 0-4 hole. And at least right now they're doing exactly that, but they're still not there in terms of completely digging themselves out of a disastrous 0-4 start to this season. But that being said, that is pretty much it for the review of all 6 of these games. Let me know in the comments below what do you think of all 6 of these games. And as always, let me know in the comments below your prediction for all 6 of these games. And tomorrow I will be doing the preview for the remaining 7 games that is going to happen. And again, the reason why I'm splitting the preview is because, you know, there is a game tomorrow between Orlando and the Quakes, and I didn't want to do the preview tomorrow and then basically upload this with like a couple of hours before this game between Orlando and San Jose is going to happen. So yeah, that's why I'm doing it today. But tomorrow I will finish looking at the remaining 7 games that's going to be happening in terms of the midweek action of match week number 8. But until then, or actually not 8, it's match week number 9. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.